Welcome to the Pinnacle Rio Major Roundtable. My name is TechGirl, and you know all these familiar faces and voices by now. We've been guiding you through the major for the last few weeks. Hawka, all the way in Brazil. We got B-Dog as well. NATO's here. NBK. Myself, I'm in Dubai. So this is a truly global podcast, and it's going to be interesting. I want to jump straight into it, but first, I mean, just looking back at the legend stage, all I have is WTF. Uh, Hawker, I have to know, you're in Brazil. You're at the hotel where the players are. What is going on there? Because there are some big names who are probably shell shocked right now that their time in Brazil is done.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been wild. I've seen some of the teams when I was going to the venue, like leave when they've been eliminated, and I think I saw FaZe, and they were just in complete shock. It's just been wild, and I'm glad we still have a couple of really good teams here, and also some of the newer teams I'm hoping can do well into the playoffs because we have a lot of faces you might not have expected at this stage. And I know that the next stage's crowd is going to be even crazier. I've seen what the arena looks like. So I'm excited to see who can step up heading into that.
We'll talk about those 8 teams that are making it through. I want to focus on each of them, but we do need to talk about FaZe B-Dog because this was a team coming into it. There was so much talk around them, so much hype, and yet they just, I mean, I won't even say they couldn't deliver. They did not deliver. They did nothing. It was like they didn't even pitch up on the server.
Yeah, like I feel like FaZe they came into kind of this stage of a lot of question marks, but no one expected them just to go 0-3, right? I feel like their matchups were quite difficult, especially in the best of ones. And when they kind of got very dominated by Vitality, I was a bit like, oh, this could be a little bit difficult for them to make it through. But you go in the series against Bad News Eagles, who had a point to prove. They were very determined to try and stake their claim. And I mean, what a scalp to take, the former major champions. It just really just looked like they didn't show up at all. They didn't really act like the same cohesive unit that they have in the previous tournaments. And it was a really rough day, a rough couple of days in Brazil for FaZe. I don't really know what happened, to be honest.
I mean, NATO, any insight there? What do you think happened with FaZe?
Yeah, well, I'm sitting and looking at it, and I have sort of a theory. Kerrigan tweeted out after the final loss that this was on me, and I was immediately, going there to write him a tweet saying like, "Hey, you lose the team, blah blah." I mean, I still do agree with that, but looking at the veto as well is actually a little bit of a tough one for FaZe. So in the match between Benus Eagles and FaZe, B&E removed Overpass, FaZe decided to remove Ancient, and then Bad News Eagles' worst map in the last 3 months is Vertigo, and FaZe had not played it at all in the last 3 months. So they are expecting them to not choose to pick it, which was kind of what they had to do, because if FaZe don't do the veto this way, then Bad News Eagles will get both Mirage and Dust 2. But Bad News Eagles called the bluff and they decided to pick Vertigo, and because of that, now FaZe come out on a map that they don't, want to play basically. So they took some risks in the veto because they wanted most likely to avoid Dust 2 and Mirage being 2 out of 3 of the maps against a, FPL team basically. And if you look at it, it makes a lot of sense, but it's also crazy that Bad News Eagles calls them on their bluff. And there's obviously questions that need to be asked here. Is it worth it when you are the number 1 team in the world to take those kind of risks against an underdog? Yeah, I guess in this case it wasn't. I think FaZe might have been able to win it out on those 2 if that would have been the case instead.
I agree with you. Of course, the other favorite coming into this after their performance at Pro League MBK was Vitality, and another team that just, I think, surprised everyone, wasn't able to make it through to the playoffs.
There's just a weird thing, right? Where they just peaked at Pro League and then it just for some reason during that event everything clicked and Zaiwu had a 1.5 rating throughout like 20 million maps over the tournament. So it's like, yeah, it obviously helps winning a lot when you have your upper doing those kind of things like on the impact rounds. And ever since it's just been a bit more rocky where even during the other stages it was tough. It was not like an easy throw of games for them to just like they just didn't show anything that justified them being the top dog at this tournament, like from the get-go. And I think that's the main thing. They just had individually, I think, some issues with players in the sense that they just didn't show up in their system. And even their approach to some of their maps, like for example, Vertigo, I was quite surprised that they picked it that much, because when they started playing it during this tournament, they just had some problems, I think, controlling A ramp, which is like key parts of the map. And it was just surprising to me that they just kept on picking it over and over again. Whereas you see maps like Inferno or something that are very comfortable. But it's like more details. But like overall, I think it didn't show that much that makes them be in a pool of like the big dog, like the big teams going for the win of the tournament. And I'm not really surprised at all the results that we've seen, because it showed already. You can see roughly the level of the teams, and the teams that should have made it through, just showing the best Counter-Strike.
We've spoken about the surprise knockouts, but what I want to talk about now is the 8 teams that have actually made it through, because these are the teams we need to celebrate. These are the ones we get to watch. And of course, because I am the most biased caster here, we're going to start with Fnatic, because they are through to the playoffs, Hawka. I am excited. I know they probably don't stand a chance, but I believe.
Yeah, we do have to say with Fnatic, they are the team here that probably got the fewest big wins to actually make it through. Like they beat NIP, ENTS, and Big. So those are all fine wins, but you would normally expect a team to have to beat one other really solid team to make it, which I don't think they had to do. But they still did a good job at handling some of those games. The series against Big, I think they played pretty well. And I'm glad they still went for their overpass pick in that, because they played that map before against Outsiders. They picked it in that one. They got completely destroyed despite picking it. But I think that was mainly just an opponent thing. And so they still picked the overpass. They still won it. Then they went on to the Mirage to take it, where they were able to just pug a bit more. And the cool thing was, I always wonder with this team, who is going to be the go-to guy? Who's going to be your main guy when you need a player to step up? Because they're a very well-rounded team, but I didn't know who was going to be the standout. And in that map where they needed to qualify, it was the experienced man Crims, who got like 28 kills, had a great map. I think they're going to need that if they're going to have any chance continuing into those playoffs, because they do have a lot of inexperienced players. Mezzi is very inexperienced as an in-game leader. They want to play quite a methodical style, and that is going to be hard to translate onto the stage.
I'm curious from a player perspective, NBK, there is a lot of these like young new players who maybe didn't necessarily expect to find themselves in the playoffs. Of course, you go into a competition wanting that, but I'm sure a little bit of a surprise when they see the likes of FaZe knocked out. Do you think that that could be problematic coming into this for some of those newer players, where they're just so excited to be there that maybe they've lost a little bit of focus going into that big arena, or not the case?
It doesn't look that way. Like they didn't seem too phased even by the games that they played so far. Like I think the beginning was a bit maybe hard for like someone like Fasher, for example, that just took a bit of time to just ramp up and like get really into the games. However, the arena is going to be a completely different atmosphere, because I think it's a central stage with like 15,000 persons. The energy in that type of scenario and environment is nothing like they will ever experience in their career again, ever. And the first time is going to be like almost their first time there, which I don't think. I mean, it might shake him, for example, like on the first map, just like they showed on the whole legend stage, where it took a bit of time to get there. And the problem is, it's 1 best of 3, you're out. So if you're not there on the very first map, it's already a big part of it where you're just like, well, shit, there you go. Whereas the Outsiders guys, first of all, they're an extremely hard team to play against, because it's just play style in the way they approach the game. And they don't seem to give a slight fuck about anything that's happening around their computer or their team whatsoever. So for Fnatic, I think they need to really show up from the moment they arrive on the stage, from the piss around, and then just run away with the game as fast as possible, and really try to shock Outsiders for that game. But yeah, like good one from Fnatic. They beat who they had to beat, and it's a team that at the moment you don't really expect them to do anything at all. You don't even speak about them really, but they're just consistently showing up more and more, and that's really good to see, I think.
think so too, but that's because I'm a Fnatic fan. Talking about the energy in the stadium, though, B-Dog, I mean, Furia, the home team, the Brazilian fans are so loyal to their home crowd and their home team. So this is for them, Furia is just this is the magic, right? This is what they were looking for. It's going to be really great for maybe Furia because they have that extra support of the crowd. But what do we think of their performance so far? Are they going to be able to handle that big stage?
Look, I feel like they will be able to handle the big stage. I mean, I've been continuously impressed with Furia throughout this run. I had really low expectations of them coming into the Legend stage, and the fact that they just clean sweep and go 3-0. I think we even mentioned it on the last roundtable. I think someone said they got the potential here just to kind of walk in and just completely plow through all the competition. So I feel like they'll handle the stage quite well. They'll really enjoy the moment, and it'll be a very special experience for all those players, and especially just that entire team in general that's involved. But you take a look at who they're against; it's against Na'Vi, and I'm a bit worried for their chances. But at the same time, Na'Vi, it's not a similar representation of FaZe. Obviously, they made it through this stage, but there's still a couple of question marks around this roster. So if Furia they come in with the momentum that they've got and they keep going, then who knows? Like, I'm too scared to predict anything anymore.
I'll predict for you, Hawker. I believe Navi will beat Furia. I'm just going to say it. If they don't, Simple should give up. But I'm saying that. That was harsh. Shouldn't have
Wow.
said that.
Well,
Taking it back. But I think Navi's going to potentially take it. How does the crowd handle that, though? Because you've been there. You've seen what this Brazilian crowd is like. How does that go down if, in Sam's world, Navi beats Furia?
I think they should be. I mean, I don't want to say fine with it because they're not going to be fine with it, but they'll be respectful. I think, especially when it's someone like Simple, that they're so respectful of a lot of the tenured players, especially. And if anything, if Na'Vi were to beat Furia, they might actually start supporting Na'Vi a bit going forward into the rest of the tournament. That's something that definitely could happen. I think for Na'Vi, it's looking pretty solid for them. On the Furia side, I do like that we got the star riflers stepping up. We got Yuri and Keserato, who are always the guys we're looking at on this team. And I also do quite like that you have Safe on this roster, who is a solid rifler, because you definitely need that on this team. The one player I'm definitely looking at, though, is Drop, because I think he had a good stage here. And I've heard that he's actually helping out with some of the calling, helping out alongside Art. He's a very inexperienced player. So it'll be interesting to see how that translates. Because I think from when I see him play, he seems like a very cerebral player. He seems like a very smart player, but he's another one that really has not had much stage experience. So I think he's definitely one I'm watching for. But yeah, Na'Vi should be pretty solid favorites in that matchup. But who knows? There is kind of the feeling around this major now, even within the teams. I think they are saying, hey, look at some of these results. Like, I think some of the underdogs are actually starting to believe because of that. You get this weird feeling where they look around and they say, oh, everyone's mortal here. We can actually make this happen.
It's interesting that you say that because hope, obviously, that's what all this sort of underdogs need. But NATO, seeing as we're talking about Navi, they are potentially one of the favorites, but also these are professionals. They know what they have to do. I'm sure that they're going to walk into this being overly prepared because this is a lineup that realizes that anything less than semifinals is not good enough.
Yeah, I completely agree. I saw Simple has already prepared the Brazilian crowd for the possibility of Furia going out. I don't know if anyone saw his tweets, but he said something like, basically between the lines, like, Brazil, don't hate me if I throw out your boys. It's exactly like you mentioned. I would say going into the tournament, I would not say Navi necessarily was in a position where they would be completely unhappy with anything less than a semifinal, probably for their own expectations. But with how kind of close the top four looked, before the event started, I feel like it's kind of okay that, Navi, you don't exactly know what can happen at a major, basically. We saw it already with some of the teams we've mentioned. But with where we are right now, where a lot of the big dogs are out of it, I have Navi as the sort of safe pick to win the whole thing. If you want to play it safe, you're picking Navi. And the reason is that they have the probably greatest player of all time in Simple, who has looked pretty on form, like nothing too spectacular for his normal level, but for any ordinary human beings level, he's still looking like an absolute beast. So yeah, I think the situation Navi is in right now, facing Furia and then facing the winner of Heroic Spirit, it's actually a disappointment to not make the final. And even if you make the final, I feel like they will probably still see it as a disappointment with the current teams that are left if they don't win the whole thing.
Another favorite, I would argue, is Cloud9, at least from the community's perspective, Hawka. This is the team that they're expecting to see. What have you thought of their performance so far?
Yeah, I think they've been good. I'm glad again we're getting the step up from Axel in this stage, because he's the one where when he's on form, his impact is incredible as a rifler, and he is up there with some of the best riflers when he is on form. And then Shiro is almost always consistently putting up numbers. And I think Shiro is getting more active on this team. I think a lot of people always thought of him as that passive AWPer that doesn't always get that involved. I think I'm seeing those glimpses of him really trying to take the game sometimes and just make plays happen, which is exciting. The big question with Cloud9 going into this stage is always going to be the stage scenarios, because they've had times before where they come through into groups, they look great, they look clean, they look really, really solid, and then they can come into playoffs sometimes and just struggle. I think Nafany is one of the guys who's had the biggest issues with that in the past. And that is scary when you're in-game leader who puts himself in really central positions. If he has tough games, then that can really just affect the whole team and sometimes even just stop the starts of the rounds from being successful because he puts himself in those positions. So really, this is a scenario where Cloud9 will be looking at this as a great opportunity. But I remember I was talking to Hobbit back on like the earliest stage, and he said they basically have everything they need, but the only thing he can't be certain of is their mentality, is their mental strength. And I think that's been the story with Cloud9 for a while now. And it was nice hearing Hobbit say that, because he's the experienced one, and he's the one you would normally expect to, make sure he steps up in these scenarios. So it's nice to hear he's saying that. He's kind of realistic. But I think they've got to be looking at this stage and saying there's a huge opportunity here.
Doug, are you putting your money behind Cloud9 for a grand final?
Yeah, I feel like you take a look at the bracket, and they've definitely got the easier run of things in the path to the final. Definitely, I mean, Maus are a very good opposition just to kind of kick things off, but again, comes into the question of how are these individuals going to perform and step up. And I feel like Cloud9 pound for pound just should beat them, shouldn't really have too much trouble in that quarterfinal stage, and then it's the winner of Outsiders versus Fnatic. I feel like that one will favor Outsiders just based on what we saw already in the earlier stages. But I feel like a real talking point in that quarterfinal is the fact that Fnatic, it felt like they didn't play their own game first time around against the Outsiders. It felt like they went for more of a punishing play style. They tried to like kind of take Outsiders at their own game. So if they maybe show up. I know that Roy was playing a lot better in the Legend stage. Same can be said with Fasher. He had a lights out performance on Nuke. I remember distinctly he was playing really well. Not that we'll see Nuke in the quarterfinals against Outsiders, but just on individual form, if they walk into that, I mean, that's a spicy quarterfinal, to be honest. I think that's actually going to be a lot closer than people might think. But Cloud9 should beat whoever they're going to play up against, and they should be in the grand final. I think I agree with what Hawker's saying, that they've got a very nice run of it, and a lot of people, and it makes sense why a lot of people in the community are saying, okay, this is actually Cloud9's really realistic big opportunity to try and win this major.
Interestingly enough, they will be facing off against Maz, a team that I think is one of those teams that I'd kind of like to see them cause an upset early on, NBK, just because I like the idea of the new stars rising up. But realistically, is their journey ending now at the start of the playoffs?
I think so. Just to touch upon Cloud9 as well. I mean, this whole matchup, I think this quarterfinal is actually much more important than it looks like, especially for Cloud9. I feel like if Cloud9 wins this, I see them winning the whole tournament based a lot of around the map pool that they have. They control Overpass at the moment. And to me, the team that is the best team on Overpass will always have a massive edge over all the others in terms of veto. And winning period. And the other thing is Mouse is also very good at overpass. So I think this is the kind of maps that we're going to see in this matchup. And I think it's going to be a very exciting best of 3. I think it's going to be like some overpass, mirage, maybe an inferno thrown in there that Mouse is going to pick. So maps that are going to be always tight. Like there's no clear winner in general on those maps. And so yeah, I think Mouse definitely has a card to play. I know they can prepare well, but CIS teams are a pain in the ass to play no matter what, especially teams like Cloud9, Outsiders. I mean, Navi is an obvious one, but the way they approach Counter-Strike and the way the players just approach the game, especially the uppers, you know you're not going to have an easy game. And Torji did have like a standout event so far, and Shiro is playing the best years of his life. So to me, that's a main contention issue point where if Shiro is on fire and Torji can't really match him, that's going to be a really tough thing for Mouse, regardless of the power that they have. I'm really happy that Mouse made it this far, especially with like such a rookie roster, and Dexter proving that he belongs in that spot and in those kind of tournaments, in those kind of teams. But I personally don't see them beating Cloud9. I think this is Cloud9's event to lose at this point, almost, with the way that they showed everything. And this first game, I think, is perfect in terms of it's going to be a tight one, I think, and that should set them up for the rest of the bracket. And for Mouse, again, I'd be very happy if they win, but I just don't see them doing that just based off of map pool and just pure one-on-one matchup in terms of players in that environment.
Nato, what do you think of this Mouse lineup potentially as one to watch for the future?
Oh yeah, in terms of ones to watch for the future, it's one of, I would say, the best lineups we have on the planet. Already with the players they have who are very young and sort of inexperienced, they've made it to top 8 in a major, which is no small feat. You're basically looking at it in a vacuum, the among the best 8 teams in the world, right? And I actually find it a little bit unfortunate in a way that Mouse get paired up with Cloud9, because I'm pretty sure if they would be paired up against a Fnatic or an Outsiders, they would be winning that matchup. Potentially also a Heroic or Spirit. If they would have ended up in any of those two types of the bracket, I think they win out the matchup actually. But I feel the same as Nathan. I have actually Cloud9 to go on to potentially win the whole tournament. I already, in the first podcast we did, was speaking highly of them. Then they went 0-2, and then I was like, what is going on here? But no, I see them as one of the really good teams. And for Mouse, in terms of ones to watch in the future, I've been with a guy like Sershan since his almost inception. I would say I met him in Faceit 5 years ago or something like that. And I was a driving force behind making sure that he got approached by the agency that represents me, and he turned down the contract, and I told him, what are you doing, and stuff like that. These like guys from the Mouse team, they are so young, but it's been obvious to me so early on that they are going to be the best players in the world, especially Sershan. He has had an absolutely insane major, but we have not seen even 50% of his potential. This guy has everything in terms of work ethic to personality to individual skill, and he's playing a hard role. And having talked to him just before the major, he was super cool and calm, just saying, yeah, I don't really mind the pressure, I'm just playing, and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, okay, they all say that, but then he actually came into the major and had a insane performance. Having played myself with Cyclone, their coach, for 3 years, something like that, one of the teammates I've had for the longest time, I also know that this guy has a good understanding of the game, and he's the type of guy. I think he's one of the in-game leaders who has impacted me the most personally. Of all the in-game leaders I've ever played with, So having him as a coach, I know how good he is at seeing the weaknesses and strengths in players and perfecting them. So yeah, I don't know, I see like it as a complete recipe for success. They have the players, so like they have the players and they have the tools necessary to reach the top, and they have the guy who is perfect at shaping these talents. So yeah, Mouse is definitely a one to watch for the future.
I want to talk about Outsiders, which is another team that I think we need to keep our eye on. But Hawka, before we do that, I mean, are you surprised by the CIS dominance? I mean, NBK mentioned it as well. Surprised by their dominance during this major?
Yeah, maybe a little, but maybe we shouldn't be as surprised because you look at the past major, Spirit were able to make their run. Outsiders are just always a team that do really well in almost just any scenario. They always seem to find a way to get wins. And they've probably been a bit underrated because they were bringing in new players and we didn't get to see them at their full potential. I also think that they actually have some pretty good players they brought in, which maybe have gone under the radar slightly. So I think it's kind of expected that Na'Vi and Cloud9 were to make it through. And maybe we were just sleeping on teams like Outsiders who have pedigree in terms of just James' ability to put together a team. And then Spirit just surprisingly have some players that, I mean, the way I describe it is they're almost like big game players, a couple of them. A couple of them just seem to come into the majors and then almost seem to perform better when they're in those pressure matches, like that one we saw where they went up against Liquid.
Doc, I mean, obviously, Spirit, Outsiders, Hawkers brought them both up. They're two teams we need to speak on. Let's start with Outsiders. Performance so far, how do you think that they go as they move into playoffs?
I'm very excited just watching them because they came in from Rotterdam. They looked very solid at Rotterdam, and the thing that really caught my eye was the fact that they were integrate. They weren't saving as much. Don't get me wrong. There are still like some rounds that are just ridiculous saves from outside. So you just think, oh come on. But they are like starting to wean that out of their game, and I feel like they are doing that a lot more because they've now got these pieces, and they are relatively inexperienced pieces. But you've got to bear in mind that when Norbert and Fame were on that K23 roster, like they were competing like really high up. They were already pushing like I'd argue they're one of those gatekeeper teams, like similar to I guess they're comparable to kind of Skade, you know, when Skade were like up there really trying to like gatekeep tier one, and it was like, okay, well, if you beat Skade or you can beat K23, then you're quite legit as a team. Um, I feel like what's interesting about this Outsiders team is that they are all functioning quite well. I mean, I know Kickert still is performing below what you expect from him, but I feel like that is being compensated by Norbert, by Fame, and I just feel like this roster is a lot more fleshed out than it was before, and I'm very it's very just interesting watching them and just James' structure as an IGL. It feels like he can take all of these different pieces and apply his fundamental way of playing, and he always gets the results out. So for me, it's been very enjoyable to watch Outsiders, and I feel like they are a very scary team coming into this. And after the performances at Rotterdam, I said to a couple of people, I wouldn't actually be surprised if Outsiders go on like a deep run here at the major. So they got Fnatic. I feel like they can beat Fnatic, and well, top four at the major. It's a pretty good result for this team.
I don't like that you said that about Fnatic, but I'll take it. You are the expert, so it's okay. NBK, of course, the other team we need to focus on, Spirits. B-Dog mentioned them a little bit. What do you think of their roster?
I believed. I just want to say I believed since the beginning. Last podcast, I put them in top 8. I believed in my guys. I think it comes down a lot to Outsiders and Spirit. Both of them, I think, have the two most underrated IGLs in the game at the moment. Outsiders, Jamie, we talk about him saving his up and being a great upper. We don't talk about how good he is at an IGL and the way that he's so annoying to play against and how he's always performing. And Spirit with Chopper, I think he's done it for years and years now, changing complete rosters, having players being taken off, adding new players. I don't know how they find the new guys, but it's been working every time. And yeah, they're just showing it again. I don't know. I think they just have such good fundamentals, and the way that they approach the game is theirs. And like, it's nothing flashy and nothing crazy, but all the individuals are always showing up when needed under Chopper's leadership. And that's a really big part. And like with the interview that they gave, that they didn't have the best atmosphere when Dexter was on the team, and things were a bit off at times. And now you seem to have a roster that works well together from the outside. It seems like it's going very well between them. And yeah, I mean, I think overall they just play a good Counter-Strike. They're not anything like too fancy, too amazing to show. But like I'm not surprised at all that they beat teams like Liquid, for example, where if you have like excellent fundamentals and like players showing up individually, well, that's the kind of team you can beat. Going to search the likes of Furia, Cloud9, Navi is going to be a bit of a different game because you need to go a bit further than just your game, and that's where they're probably going to struggle a bit more. But again, they beat the teams they had to beat: Bad News Eagle, Sprout, Liquid. Those are all teams that you face them against Spirit, and you're like, oh yeah, well, Spirit has a very good chance. Like it's a 50-50 almost. So yeah, I'm not completely surprised. I know the quality of the individuals, and what mattered was whether or not they would show it in the moment. And they came up. I think they don't have any standout player necessarily. Maybe Patsy is like a guy that is really to look to watch. I don't know how to say it in English properly, but to really focus on. Like he's a really good player, and overall the team is coherent. And I don't know if they're gonna be able to reach like a top 5 kind of spot, and even going like top 4 in the major, like top 5 in the world, like constantly. But top 10 team easily, and very consistent with it.
Yeah. Sorry, if I may, I just want to add on to that. We were talking about Mouse and their NXT projects in the academy. I just want to highlight that Siren and Patsy, they're guys that came out of Spirit Academy as well. I think I saw a tweet last night that said about 30% of all players in the top 8, and that there's 40 players because there's 8 teams, are academy graduates, which is incredible, and it's just going to show the level and the depth and the fact that this is a proven thing that is working, and it's just exciting to see. And another player, Siren, he performed incredibly well in that Liquid game, and I think he's really flown under the radar in terms of just spirit and the way that he's been playing. I really like the term big game players that Hawka mentioned, because I feel like Siren is one of those, especially in the major environment.
Yep.
Could you think that this is I mean, Nato, jump right in.
Oh yeah, sorry. No. I completely agree with B-Dog as well. Cyrus is a big game player, and one thing I think is really important for me also is that about Spirit. Right now, every map is basically CT sided. If you check the stats, it's not really being talked about enough. But because the silenced M4 and now you can drop your grenades and everything, there's so many things going the CT's way, and it's something I hope we see change in the future. But I had, for example, Spirit to beat Bad News Eagles because I had them 0-3, and Spirit got I think 8 CT rounds on Ancient. When they switched, I was thinking, oh no, Bad News Eagles and their CT sides on Ancient, Spirit won that map, I believe, 16-7 or 16-8. And they are one of the few teams I feel like who consistently have good showings on T side of Ancient. And that's actually one of the things that is really, I don't know, interesting to me, which is why I wanted to mention it, that we don't see too many teams who consistently have good T sides on Ancient. It's still such a new map. But it's pretty nice trump card to have that people have to be afraid of both sides of your Ancient, both your CT and T. It makes the map almost unplayable against you. And I feel like that's a really big advantage Spirit has just coming into the top 8, but just like the future in general.
Hawka, do you think that this major showcase that maybe teams need to and organizations need to start investing a little bit more in new talent? Those academy systems are clearly working. It's a far more financially beneficial system as well, as opposed to just buying big players. Do you think we'll see a lot more investments in younger talent following Rio?
Yeah, potentially. It's certainly interesting to see how many players have come through that sort of system. I think for Spirit, the other cool thing is Wonderful is 17, man. Wonderful is 17. He was their highest rated player as the AWPer, which is awesome. I think it's nice that we have this different talent pipeline where it's a lot easier to have those players get the opportunities and just get maybe called up to the main roster as a stand-in situation or something like that. Because we've always had online CS where the teams and the level of CS online has always been really high. It's just not been easy to actually transition into a top team from that, especially for maybe some of the players that don't put up as big of numbers, because it's sometimes hard to look fully into what role you're playing. You know, if you're a star player at the tier 2 level, you're going to get your call up eventually. But I think even for someone like Exertion, I think he was pretty good for Mal's NXT. I don't think he was like putting up crazy numbers in the Academy League where you'd say, oh, you have to pick this guy up. And there's quite a few of those. I think Drop was kind of similar for Furia. There's quite a few of those guys where it's like, I don't think they were ever putting up these crazy star numbers where the numbers almost make you have to look at them and maybe think about picking them up. It seems like it's actually sometimes some of these players where their numbers are just fine, but they have other aspects to their game. It seems like that's where having an academy team, you can see those sorts of players much more easily. You can see the intangibles a lot more easily.
We've gone through 7 teams. I've left the 8th one, and I've specifically left Heroic till the end. Nato, the last podcast, I said they're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I'm starting to think for the Rio Major, this might be Cadian shouting down the aisle, getting to the end based on what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it will be it will be definitely a sight to see if that were to happen. I think though they've, you know, a lot of majors, we have the 2 favorites ending up in the same side of the bracket, and we get like the real final in the semi-final. This one is one of those majors where I think the 2 absolute favorites to take the trophy are either side of the bracket. So we're getting like that grand final that we're kind of expecting. But unfortunately for teams like Heroic, who want to be making the final, there is an issue when the 2 favorites are either side of the bracket, right? And Heroic, if they were to make it to the semifinal, and if Navi were to make it to the semifinal, they are, going up against one of the toughest teams we've seen in recent years. They have Simple, as we already mentioned. Don't need to talk too much about him. Probably most people are familiar. And I do think it is too tall of an order for Heroic to beat Navi. I feel like Navi is a team with a style that is just so well rounded that there are so few weaknesses. When I see them up against a team like Furia, for example, which we're going to see in the quarterfinals, Furia is a super aggressive team trying to exploit the gaps, a lot of moving parts all the time. But Navi is one of the few teams, maybe the only team, who I would say can consistently shut that kind of style down just because they have 5 players who are all so good. Everyone is just winning their duels, And for Heroic, I see them as having a little bit of the same style, not as aggressive as Furia, but it's still a lot of moving parts. And I feel like for them, it will be very hard to defeat a team like Navi, where I think for Heroic, it might have been more likely to see them beat a team like Cloud9.
Hawka, so is Cadian is the bridesmaid once again?
I have a feeling there might be a chance for them here. You look at the past majors. Okay, firstly, Cadian played majors in like 2014, and then he got onto Heroic and he played his first major for like years in 2021. But even at these events, at Antwerp, for example, they beat Vitality and they actually played pretty close against Na'Vi. They won the first map and then they only lost the second map 16-14. And they did the same against G2 back at Stockholm. They played a really close series. That series was ridiculously close. They could have had the chance to beat them there. So they've always been a team that I think can absolutely play the top teams close. And in that series against Na'Vi last time out, I remember Refresh having a really rough series. I actually think that's part of what made them decide to make this roster move and bring in Yabi. And it seems like, for whatever reason, I think they've maybe changed the way Yabi's playing a little bit for this tournament. He's playing way better. And I also want to say, there's a bit of a narrative about Cadian that he doesn't step up in big BO3s or in sort of stadium games and playoffs. But in that previous series against Na'Vi at Antwerp in that quarterfinal that was super close, Cadian was top fragging for his team or was the highest rated. So I actually think there are opportunities. Stown is another play you're going to have to look at. It is just that tough part of, again, you look at someone like a Na'Vi, for example, when you say, okay, well, Simple's probably always going to have his moments. And for Heroic, it almost has to be that team effort, which means basically everyone has to have a good game. And that is always the big question, because that's always a big strength if you have players across the board that can play well. but it does kind of mean you don't always have that one player on heroic that can step up. I think Stown could be that guy in the future. I would really love to see Stown almost develop and take a bit more responsibility at times, because I think he kind of has to be that player who is the standout on this team. But I really think there's a chance that they could actually win a semifinal. Like, I really think there's an actual chance they could, again, almost play spoiler to one of the top teams.
I think of that, we need to have a little bit of fun. It is our final Rio Roundtable, so the Pinnacle pick'ems need to happen, and also many because I want to have you all fighting with each other before I say goodbye to you for the final time. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the playoffs. We're going to try and see if we can all come to a decision as to how it's going to go and find out who will ultimately be the major winner. And then we can come back and see how we got it horribly wrong later. So let's jump into this. Of course, that first matchup, Mouse versus Cloud9. I'll go through each of you. B-Dog, starting with you, who takes this one?
Cloud9. I feel like they're just better pound for pound, but also I'm not. I don't fact check me on this because I don't know how accurate this statement's going to be. But I'm not. I think Mao's had the lowest or one of the lowest games, like where they didn't play in front of a crowd. Like they were always. It felt like they were always on the B stream. And you got that inexperience there already. You're then going to plonk them without too much experience in the challenges and the legend stage, just in the big arena. I feel like that's going to go against them even more so. So even with Exertion playing like he doesn't care, so I'm going to go Cloud9.
Cloud9, NBK, how about you?
I'll go Cloud9 2-1. I think Mouse is gonna put up a fight, but I also think that Mouse is not necessarily very comfortable playing against CIS teams that play a slow, annoying style. So like they got not trash, but they got beat pretty hard by outsiders in the legend stage, and they still went 2-2 in the end, and then 3-2, so barely made it. Cloud9 just looks on point. I'll go Cloud9 2-1. Yeah, for a lot of reasons, but they just look at like a better team.
Hawka, how about you? Are we still sticking with the Cloud9?
Yeah, I think so. I think the one edge you would want to have against a Cloud9 is almost like that mental aspect and having experienced players. I think that's the one angle you would need to have a chance, because fundamentally Cloud9 are an incredibly good team and Mouse aren't as good as them. And I also think for whatever reason, Mouse have actually like struggled pretty heavily on their CT sides throughout this stage of the major. I was just looking at the numbers. They have a lower CT round win percentage than FaZe at this stage of the major, and FaZe went out 0-3. So that has been a bit of an issue for them. I've seen them get run over a couple of times, and I just think Cloud9 are going to be too good across the board in this.
It's 3-1 at the moment, NATO. Obviously, it looks like Cloud9 is going to be the pinnacle shot. Are you going with Mouse? Do you want to try and plead their case to everyone else and see if you can change someone's votes, or are you sticking with the same?
I mean, I love Mouse. They will always be in my heart for the time when they asked me to stand in at the summit, and also for all the friends I have there. But with that said, this one is going to be Cloud9 for me. Anyone who watched the match yesterday, I believe it was versus ENS as well, on the last map, that really heavily came down to Dexter having like an outrageous CT performance at the end of that match. And I feel like that is probably the most unlikely thing to happen twice. Like, it's really rare we've seen Dexter being the guy to step up, massively in the dying embers. I guess it could happen, but yeah, I've already talked a lot about how I think Cloud9 is one of the favorites coming into the event. I feel like they've shown that they deserve that kind of title, and I think they're better than Mouse right now. But I would not be mad if Mouse win. Like, I think it's either way. There's so many good matchups in this bracket. Like, they are also kind of 50-50.
Pinnacle pick him for that.
Oh, are you muted, TechGirl?
Yeah, I think you muted yourself accidentally. Yep, we're good.
And now again.
You're muted
Now
again.
again.
I'm muting myself because
Now we're good.
I'm very heartbroken about what's about to happen, because you've been my podcast friends for 3 weeks, and I'm going to talk about the next matchup, and you're going to break my heart. But here we go. Outsiders versus Fnatic. NATO, we'll start with you. Who takes this one?
Well, I'm gonna say Outsiders. I have them in my pick'ems, my personal pick'ems, and I think it is pretty 50-50. I don't feel like we have enough sort of evidence to say 100% one team is winning. Someone made a tweet, I'm not sure who, but that the best team Fnatic beat in a best of 3 to make it here was Big, who are number 15 in the world. Who are, I mean, I don't know, not one of the favorites going into the tournament. So I feel like outsiders have been more impressive with their wins, and Fnatic have looked very shaky in the challenger stage as well. So I'm gonna go with outsiders.
NBK, how about you?
I don't want to let you down, so I'm gonna pick Fnatic. No, I'm kidding. I'm picking outsider. Sorry, I let you in there. It's gonna be, I think, closer than what people might expect, just based off of the map pool. Outsider is batting Nuke, that is Fnatic's by far best map. Fnatic is batting Dust 2, which is an okay map for outsiders, but not the best. I think outsiders is a better overpass team, although that's true. That could be like the main point of contention between the two teams, where there are two good overpass teams, and that's going to be a very interesting one. But then outsiders also have Vertigo, so I think it's like advantage to outsiders. I think it's going to be tight. I don't think it's going to be like a completely crushed game 2-0 fast forwards here. I think it's going to be like a 2-0 outsiders, but like a close one, like close overpass, close Vertigo. I think it's going to go more that way with the elements that we have right now.
B-Dog, how about you?
I think, yeah, it's going to be a different best of 3 to what we saw from them previously, but I feel like outsiders just have that slight edge with the experience, and I think although all the individuals are Fnatic performing very well, I just feel like Jame and his annoying style to play against will just edge it out. So outsiders for me.
Hawka, it's obviously 3-1 to outsiders. Do you want to plead Fnatic's case, or are we all sticking to this one?
Oh, my heart would love to, but my head has to go with Jame again. I really feel like Fnatic have a lot of good things going for them, and a lot of things going forward, which are going to be great. I almost feel like Mezzy wants to call a similar style to Jame, where it is this super methodical and slow style, and Jame has way more experience calling that style. I mean, you saw it on the overpass. Outsiders in that series, they have already played against each other previously. Every single round, outsiders got some late round info. They stacked the right site, and Fnatic just ran into a brick wall round after round. And the other thing that outsiders have, and I think something that hasn't been given credit for, is the addition of Fame so far into this roster has opened up a bit more of a puggy play style occasionally. On Mirage, for example, Fame will probably have a couple of rounds where he just runs out mid and just gets a couple of entries. He's done it a lot of times. I've seen this guy, and his aim is very sharp. I just think that Veto is also so tough. I don't know what Fnatic pick here. If they pick Overpass again, that is terrifying. It's a really strong map for outsiders. It sucks. I think this is just such a bad matchup for Fnatic. I just can't see them winning it.
You know what else sucks? You guys. You all suck. But
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
The Pinnacle
Unfortunate.
podcast selection is outsiders. I am making this decision under duress. Just want to make it clear. Let's move on. Spirit versus Heroic. Hawka, we'll go back to you. Who takes it?
I think this will be a fun one. I think this is the one I'm maybe most excited for almost in this section, because Spirit have been such a surprise. They seem like a team who practice really hard coming into the major, and then their individuals hit a complete another level. And they almost have some similarity with Heroic in that they have pretty good fraggers across the board. I mean, I am going to go with Heroic. I just think that they're just really solid across the board. I could even see them maybe when we're getting to the next round causing a little upset. But I just think Heroic have shown a much better ability at this event. I just really like a lot of the way they play. So I do think Heroic will take this. Again, though, all of these matchups, you could definitely make the case for Spirit winning this one. I think there's a lot of exciting matches here.
Nato, how about you? Heroic or Spirit?
Well, I'm Danish, so I have to say Heroic. Funnily enough, Hawka, you mentioned that Spirit have been practicing a lot up to the event and stuff like that. I saw an interview yesterday of Siren saying that they were at some other event or something like that where they didn't have access to PCs when they were not playing the tournament itself or something like that. So they actually barely had any practice leading up to the event. in terms of individual practice, was what I understood. You know, you still talk about tactics and everything, but if you don't have access to a PC you can play on, it's tough. But so actually, it might be the reason we've seen them also kind of get stronger and stronger and stronger in the tournament. I'm still gonna go with heroic though, but just yeah, a fun fact.
B-Dog, how about you? Is it a heroic or spirit win?
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it, but I feel like heroic have just pound for pound going to be better, and I feel like they will edge it out over spirit. I feels bad because Spirit I've kind of grown into more of a fan as I've been watching them over this course, and but I feel like Cadian's really in the game at the moment, especially like even going back to the RMR and like the games that they played against Big and Vitality, it felt like Cadian was just called in really good CT sides. And obviously CT sides is incredibly strong at the moment, but when you've got your in-game leader and everyone trusting the calls he's making behind it, and then more often than not being correct, that's quite scary. So I'm going to go for heroic.
NBK, want to change everyone's mind? Plead spirit's case?
Look, I'm looking at the veto first of all, and Spirit is going to pick Vertigo. Heroic is going to pick Mirage most likely. I think they're both going to win those picks because Heroic hasn't shown too much on Vertigo. Heroic hasn't shown too much on Spirit hasn't shown too much on Mirage, and then it's a best of one at the end of the day. And on that best of one, regardless of the map, I'm picking Spirit. I believe in Serious dominance. I'm going with them. I believe in Chopper. I believe in them just like waking up on that third map on like a nuke that Heroic hasn't played for like 2 months or something. And they're just going to come in, surprise with their game style, surprise Heroic in the way that they're going to approach the map. And just like that, they're just going to snap it away from Heroic. There's never all 4 favorites are going to win the quarterfinals. There's got to be an upset. And I believe that Spirit is the one team to make it. They proved it in Antwerp. They don't care about the big stage. They're going to be there. They're going to play the game. Heroic doesn't care too much either. I just think that with the veto, with the way it should come down, it should end up in a 1-1 situation. And then best of one, I have Spirit. That's going to be my justification. Those are my arguments. You're free to change your mind if you want to, but I believe in them getting top 4 and like, you know, in the same way that there is a part that thinks that Heroic can go in the semi and then ruin people in the semi. I agree with that. I also think that this exact same scenario could happen with Spirit ruining the hopes of Heroic straight in a quarterfinal by just edging them there and then struggling in that semifinal. But yeah, I'll just go there against the grain. And I believed in Spirit before. They didn't let me down. I believe in them again. So I have them winning this quarterfinal.
Anyone want to change their vote to spirit, courtesy of NBK's passionate plea there? The gents will look like that. Okay, they're sticking to
Yeah,
it.
no,
I'm
it's
sorry.
not happening. It's all right.
Okay, you can feel what I felt earlier. Heroic is our pick. And finally, Furia, Navi, NBK. Who's taking this one?
So that's yeah. I mean, again, I agree that all those 4 quarterfinals are rough. I think in terms of map pool again, that's like one of the main things we can base ourselves on. The best maps of both teams are not going to be played, which is I think a very interesting topic, and so we're going to see them on like maps where they're a bit more shaky. On one hand, you have Navi that is going to have the experience of them as a team to be stable in that regard, and you have Furia's dominance so far with the public and the crowd and everything that they've been showing, like, you know, being carried on by that. And so I give it to Navi, but like a 51 to 49% type of chance where it's like, I really want Furia to go all the way and win because that's going to be an experience for their whole lives that it would mark the scene, like everything. I think Navi just has like a slight edge. I think in the opping department, especially, there is a gap between Safi and Simple, which I think is quite important, especially on the stage, because those are going to be the easy frags you're going to get in the matchup, and that's also I think what's going to be a difference. But then in terms of star like rifle players, I give the edge to Furia at the moment, and so that's where it's like, you know, it's a bit balanced, right? Like you have arguments for both, and that's why I give Navi just with the slightest edge against Furia, but it's a real toss up.
B-Dog, how about you?
I was really hoping you wouldn't come to me next. My heart really wants to say Furia. Like I really want to say Furia, but my head is like, it just should be Navi. just because of the pieces, but I'm gonna say Furia. I feel like I have to. I got a gut feeling. I'm just gonna go with it.
Hawka, how about you?
I think I still go Na'Vi here. I think Furia's style can be really, really punishing against teams that have maybe some weaker individuals at times, or players that aren't in great form. And Na'Vi just don't have that. They have good players across the board. I guess the argument for Furia would be their run has been really good recently. They've been on a big streak after their success earlier. They've gone through this stage without taking a loss. And also for Na'Vi, I think I was kind of waiting to see what Bit would show us at this event, because he's been the one player that's been talked about. And I don't think we've seen the level from Bit that we would want. I mean, he's still kind of a rookie, so it's almost harsh to place these high expectations on him. But he's not been as good as I would want as sort of one of those riflers to look at as maybe a star. But I just think Furious style just it could maybe run over Na'Vi, but it's so hard to see it happening when you look down the list of names on the Na'Vi side.
Okay, finally, NATO. Which team are we going with here?
I'm going with Navi. I agree with some of the others that I feel like the seeding in the tournament has been heavily criticized, and I'm also one of those critics. But I feel like in terms of how the matches have ended up for the playoffs here, we have probably the most 50-50 matchups we could have. And I find that to be really interesting, because a lot of the times when we go into playoffs and majors, it's kind of obvious who's gonna win. You know, I feel like that people are mostly afraid for the challenger stage, the legend stage, but the diamond coin is sort of secure if you can make it to playoffs. This time, there's no such thing. I feel like it's super tough to predict who's gonna come out on top. I think for me, it's going to be Navi, but I think also for me, it's going to be the fact that I think the match won't be close. Like either Furious style works and they just run over Navi with the crowd behind them, or Navi shut down Furia and then they just take over the game. I find it very unlikely we're going to see like triple overtimes and stuff like that. I think it will be like some of the maps will probably be like 16-8, 16-10 or something like that. But yeah, it's still a close match. Just I don't think the score lines will be close. Whoever wins it will win it pretty safely, I think.
So the official pick'ems, yeah, from the Pinnacle podcast, we're going with Cloud9 moving into the semifinals, outsiders, Heroic, and Na'Vi. I don't want to spend too much time breaking down our semifinals and grand finals, because as the Rio Major has shown us, we don't know what's going to happen. So very quickly, just so we can finally decide who we think wins the major, but no reason to give explanations. This is just a little bit of fun that we're going to have at the end of the podcast. B-Dog, who wins those two semifinals and who ultimately wins the major?
Cloud9 win their semi-final. I think if it is Heroic, I think Heroic will actually win their semi-final, and then it will be Cloud9 Heroic, and then that question of mentality really comes into it. And again, I'm just going on gut feeling. I actually think this could be Heroic's dark horse moment. So I'm going to actually predict Heroic to win the major.
Okay. All right. I mean, at the rate this has been going, you're probably correct. So there we go. Nate, so how about you?
Well, after that, I'm going to predict Fnatic to win the major.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, I think I'm going to just go with the obvious ones, like Cloud9 to win one semi, Navi to win the other semi. I have Cloud9 winning the final, though, just as Nathan, I believe, mentioned earlier.
NBK, what's your call here?
Oh, it's a rough one. Everything can happen. I can see outsiders beating Cloud9, so I'll just stick with what I said. Cloud9 goes in the final against. I just need to find a coin, just flip it and see just what comes up, because that's really what it comes down to. I see a Cloud9 Navi, CIS dominance, they're just showing it. And Cloud9 beating their demons and actually beating Navi to win the major, because it's the year of this. If you look at League of Legends, if you look at Dota, you have like all those things that happen where it's like the underdogs are just coming in and smashing things up. And Cloud9 is going to take it.
Hawka, 2 for Cloud9, 1 for Heroic. How do you think these semifinals and grand finals play out?
Yeah, I also have Cloud9. I think it just feels like they've got a really nice run to make that final. And then I'm kind of with B-Dog. I just have that feeling that Heroic are going to break through here. I just have that feeling. I think Na'Vi aren't. Ooh, I will see. I feel like Na'Vi aren't at their best right now. I think if there were a time where they could do it, I think now could be it. And then I would say I think Cloud9 would beat Heroic if we got that final. I just think the styles match up where Cloud9 can default pretty well, and I think they would be pretty favored there. So it sounds like we've got some Cloud9 believers, which I'd be excited about.
I'm very excited because I've been waiting for this opportunity. I get to be the tiebreaker. So obviously the Cloud9 wins their semifinal. That's been decided. The other semifinal, we got 2 for Na'Vi, 2 for Heroic. And because this is the last one and we're never going to be held accountable for the things we say, I'm going with Heroic. That's the Pinnacle podcast pick. And based on the major, will probably be right now. But for the final, obviously it's Cloud9. There was a 3-1 decision. So those are our picks. And as we know, pick'ems are rubbish. Nobody should ever worry about them because you're always getting them wrong. But that's basically what we think the major is going to play out to do. It's a Cloud9 win. That's the decision. Gents, it's been fantastic. I've had so much fun chatting to all of you. Hawka, make sure you get that Brazilian barbecue in before you enjoy the crowds at the final. And to everyone who's watched along, we hope that you've enjoyed the show. Make sure you share your choices with us. You can do it on social media. Just tag Pinnacle Esports. And we'll all be celebrating after this, hopefully with a Cloud9 victory.